Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're playing linguistic detectives to piece together a totally lost ancient voice. We're going way back, long before English ever hit the British Isles, to uncover a language that shaped the very geography we know today.
So let's kick things off with a little puzzle. What do the legendary name Arthur and the famous river Avon actually have in common? I mean, they're iconic British names, right? The kind you see in atlases or hear in folklore. But what they share is literally an invisible ancestral tongue. It's a linguistic connection that skips right past modern English and takes us thousands of years back to the indigenous people of Iron Age Britain.
And that invisible language? It's called Common Brittonic. It was a Celtic language spoken by the Celtic Britons, and it was absolutely the primary language across most of Great Britain, specifically south of the Fourth Clyde Line in Scotland, from roughly the 6th century BCE all the way to the mid-6th century CE. It's basically the original indigenous voice of the island. Think of it as this massive grandparent language that birthed a whole family of regional dialects. It was the everyday, on-the-ground vernacular of the native Britons for the entire Iron Age, and it kept right on going through centuries of Roman occupation.
Section 1. Birth of a language, tracing the Celtic roots. Let's map out exactly when and where this language actually came from.
You know, languages don't just magically appear out of nowhere. They grow and adapt over huge stretches of time. If we trace its evolution between 1300 and 800 BCE, its ancestor, Proto-Celtic, was actually spoken over in Central Europe. Then massive migrations brought Celtic speakers across the Channel to Britain during the Bronze Age. Because they were now on an island, geographically isolated, between 1000 and 500 BCE, their speech started to diverge into what we call Proto-Brittonic. By the 6th century BCE, boom, Common Brittonic was firmly established as the main language of the land. It thrived for over 1,000 years, passing down stories orally from generation to generation. That is, until the mid-6th century CE, when immense historical pressures finally broke that unified language apart.
Which brings us to Section 2. Brittonic versus Old English. A linguistic collision. Let's look at how these competing languages clashed. This collision was massive because these two languages were literally alien to one another. On one side, you have Common Brittonic, an insular P-Celtic tongue. It had this very distinct verb-subject-object sentence structure. So instead of saying, I see the fort, you'd actually say, see I the fort. But here's the crazy part. It was completely oral. It had absolutely no native alphabet of its own. We only have these ghostly records written by other people in Latin or early Ogham script. On the flip side, we have Old English. This was a West Germanic invader language brought over by the Angles, Saxons, and Jutes, and it came fully equipped with a rigid runic alphabet and entirely new spelling rules, including the hard TH sound and the thorn character. Because Brittonic completely lacked a widespread written record, capturing its unique oral sounds on parchment became a total nightmare for later scribes. Medieval English and Norman scribes desperately struggled to write down Northern Brittonic dental fricatives. You know, those subtle breathy th and d sounds that came so naturally to Celtic speakers? So they basically just guessed. They haphazardly threw English and Norman letters like CHT, D, and T at the page to try and capture the pronunciation. Just look at the data here. A massive 58% reliance on th just to cover one highly nuanced Celtic sound. It really goes to show how the indigenous voice was heavily filtered and, honestly, often completely distorted by the rigid writing systems of its conquerors.
Section 3. The Great Splintering, a language divided. So you might be wondering, is Common Brittonic still spoken anywhere today? Well, the short answer is no, not in its original form anyway. When Anglo-Saxon migrations disrupted the Britons, that unified grandparent language violently fractured. Between the 5th and 7th centuries, geographic isolation pushed it to the fringes of the island, splintering it into 4 distinct daughter languages. Up north, Cumbric was completely swallowed up by Old English and Scots, going totally extinct by the 12th or 13th century. Down in the southwest, we got Cornish, which technically died out in the 18th century, but amazingly has seen a modern revival. Over in the west, it evolved into Welsh, which proudly and vibrantly survives today. And some fleeing Britons even took it across the Channel to France, where it evolved into Breton, which is also still spoken. So while Common Brittonic stopped being a single, unified language, its children absolutely kept its DNA alive. Moving to Section 4. A living linguistic legacy. Ghosts in the landscape. Let's see how this ancient tongue is definitely not entirely dead. Even though the language splintered, we do have a few fascinating, deeply personal artifacts left. Take a look at this. May I defeat the worthless woman, divine dieta. This isn't from some grand historical chronicle. It's actually translated from a 2nd century Roman curse tablet found in the hot springs of Bath. Someone literally inscribed this on a piece of lead to ask a goddess for some petty local revenge. It's this incredibly rare, tangible piece of Brittonic-influenced Latin. It gives us such a fleeting, human glimpse into the minds of ancient Britons, perfectly blending their native Celtic grudges with the Latin alphabet of their Roman occupiers.
But beyond curse tablets and museums, does modern English actually still use common Brittonic words? Oh, absolutely. Because it lacked a written record, it mostly survives as ghosts in our modern geography. Take the famous river Avon. Avon derives from the Brittonic word abona, which simply means river. So when you tell someone you're visiting the river Avon, you're literally saying you're visiting the river. Or the legendary name Arthur. That's widely believed to derive from Artos, meaning bear, a great symbol of warrior strength. And ancient cities like Colchester were originally called things like Camelodunon, meaning the fort of the god Camelos. The native words were just adopted and adapted by invading English speakers, locking the ancient Celtic tongue into the map forever.
Which brings us to a perfect closing thought. How many hidden Celtic words might you be walking past in your own hometown today? Common Brittonic may have vanished as a unified term over 1,000 years ago, but it left this indelible, invisible fingerprint everywhere. So as you go about your day, take a look at the names of the hills, the rivers, and the towns around you. Ask yourself what ancient ancestral stories those names are quietly trying to tell you. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and keep your ears open for the ghosts of history hiding in plain sight.